S1E7. Welcome to Forever Break Podcast. And now, an underwhelmed Brit and an over-enthusiastic American. Here are your hosts, Lianne and Corey.
Welcome back, everybody, or welcome to any newcomers to the Forever Break Podcast.
Yeah.
A podcast about mindfulness and exploring the different themes, how we can incorporate it into our lifestyle. Today, we're going to be looking at listening and sound and how they impact our daily lives. We're going to be looking at how sound waves are all around us all the time and what effect they can have to us and our subconscious.
And we're going to look at listening to understand, not respond. Also, an interview with the lovely Terri Bowman from the Brain Wellness Spa in Perth, Australia. Great interview. Make sure you stick around for that one. She is a very
Lovely.
inspiring woman.
She really is. And remember, if you do want to find out any more information about any of the topics we do cover on here, just check it out at the Forever Break website. It has got an abundance of information.
Foreverbreak.com is probably the most visited webpage on all of my devices. And that's a lot of devices.
Technology, man.
Quick quote.
Unless one is able to live fully in the present, the future is a hoax, by Mr. Alan Watts.
What did he say?
Focus on.
All right, let's focus on something called alpha wave music, which is pretty new to us. And here's a short example for you. So what did you think about that little snippet? How did it make you feel? Do you know that that was actually alpha wave music?
So many questions.
Yeah, what are alpha waves? Lianne, why don't you answer that?
Well, a Google search taught me that alpha waves are 8 to 12 Hz, which also means hertz, being a unit of measurement for things like alternating electric currents, electromagnetic waves, and of course, sound.
Yeah, alpha brainwaves are one of the 5 brainwaves naturally created by the brain at different stages of consciousness. They're dominant during quietly flowing thoughts and in some meditative states. Alpha is the power of now. It's just being here, in the present.
So deep.
Alpha is the resting state for the brain.
Yeah, the alpha wave music can tap into this resting state and aid overall mental coordination, calmness, alertness, and mind and body integration and learning.
Alpha wave music can be played for free on YouTube or downloaded from your favorite online music store. While you can listen to alpha wave music at any time, its strongest impact is when you're resting or you can play it as you're going to sleep. One thing that we have found is that a lot of the YouTube channels that have them, it's something that they find can be really good if you're studying and you just are trying to 100% focus. It seems to really help with that. So that's recommended for all of our students or lifelong learners out there.
Nice reference. And yeah, in addition to all that, the alpha wave music has been shown to increase creativity and help people cope with depression and anxiety. But Corey, how does this all work?
I gotta tell you, I got no idea.
Neither do I. So why don't we just listen to an interview with an expert?
Yep, let's do it.
Expert interview.
Okay, today we're going to be speaking with the sound and brainwave extraordinaire, Miss Terri Bowman from the Brain Wellness Spa. It is here where Miss Bowman and her colleagues target a variety of mental health issues through the use of sound, looking at problems ranging from insomnia to depression and anxiety, and even borderline personality disorder. They focus on this natural and drug-free approach to access the inner workings of your subconscious and help you get the most out of that little noggin of yours.
Yep, mental illness can be a touchy subject, and in decades past, talking about it was definitely a big taboo. According to Name.org, 19.1% of US citizens struggle with mental health. Thankfully, it's becoming so much more open. People are more comfortable talking about it, and people are reaching out for help, whether through talk therapy or alternative methods. So, may we present Terri Bowman.
How are you today, Terri?
I'm going great, thanks, Corey, and really well.
Great. Well, we're excited to have you here. And as for our first question, many mental health sufferers are reluctant to go on medication as there can be unwanted side effects. At the Brain Wellness Spa, you target a wide array of conditions through natural therapy, tapping into the subconscious. Can you give us a simple overview of the science of the sound therapy and how it's used in your practice?
So what we do is we actually connect into the unconscious brain. So I actually bypass the subconscious. So a lot of people refer to the unconscious brain as the subconscious, but what we actually work with the unconscious brain. The unconscious brain is your genetic brain, so it can go up to 7 generations of genetic memory. And so what actually happens is we actually bypass the conscious brain, go into the unconscious brain, and what we do is through voice, and it's just through voice and sound waves frequency, because your voice is actually got harmonic frequencies. We actually recode the unconscious brain to change behaviour.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard of that, going through the unconscious is genetic. I never heard about that before.
Yeah.
That's
so the
fascinating.
unconscious brain actually accesses up to 7 generations of genetic memory. So it's actually your genetic brain. And if you think about it, if we only accessed up to 2 generations of genetic memory, we'd all look the same, we'd all sound the same, we'd all be the same, we'd all think the same. So your brain
sounds
actually
boring, doesn't it?
So it actually has to go up. The gene pool has to be a bigger gene pool than 2 generations, and it goes up to 7 generations. That's what I work on, and that's what I've found in my workings and my research. It's up to 7 generations. But scientists today are actually working on different types of organisms and everything like that. And some organisms go up to 14 generations of genetic memory.
Wow.
So, but that's because their life cycle is actually shorter. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's really interesting.
And Russian scientists, I can't remember their names because they're Russian. And,
That's all right.
But there's some Russian scientists who have actually discovered that you can change DNA just by virtue of voice frequencies, sound waves, and harmonic frequencies.
Unbelievable. Yeah, we're actually doing another episode for this season of the podcast on epigenetics. So we're trying to learn all about that, and it seems very similar.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. So it actually works on the epigenetics of your biology.
That's amazing.
So that's what my work does.
Cool.
Work does here.
Cool. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey with Psyche and how you started the Brain Wellness Spa? Like, where did that come about? How did you begin?
So what actually happened? I actually watched a video from Bruce Lipton called the Biology of Belief and the Psychology of Change, and in there it actually had Rob Williams doing a whole segment on Psyche, and I was working with a sales group, and I always thought, there's a missing link. There was a gap between people being able to perform and not perform. Does that make sense? I was actually more about performance.
Okay.
And I thought, and when I looked at Psyche, I thought that was the link. That was the link between people succeeding and not succeeding. Okay. So what I did was I actually took myself off to the UK and actually studied Psyche over there, and I came back home and actually started practicing. I was practicing first before I practiced, and I actually was working with some friends of mine, and I just found out I was really skilled in that area. I had this natural gift that I gravitated to brain behaviour, but it was actually Psyche is more perceptions and beliefs.
Okay.
So it works a lot on that, in the way I actually understood it, perceptions and beliefs. And so what actually happened was when I went back to Germany and did further studies with it, I actually was working with people. But what I found is over a period of time, the people would come back. It was that revolving door. They'd come back. You can change perceptions and beliefs, but if your brain triggers back into a default pattern of behaviour, which is your genetic brain, you come back and you've got the same.
You're back at step one
again, and that's what I found. You're back at step one, and what I found with typical therapies, a lot of typical therapies, is actually you can get an approach where you feel good, but then you'd be right back where you started from, 3 or 4, 5 months later. So I had to throw all that away, and I had to go down a path to understand the genetic brain, and that's what I did.
Awesome. And is that kind of like where you started the Brain Wellness Spa? Once you understood all of this, you're kind of like, I need to start a business that thinks about this. And okay, awesome.
Well, see, what I did was I actually developed a technique, and for legal reasons I can't say what it is.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Of course,
but for legal reasons. But I can say it's a brain retraining technique.
Okay.
And I developed this technique starting off I started off Psych K about 14 years ago, and I developed this technique about 11 years ago.
Okay.
And what it does is it works on the patterning. It works on the triggers first. So when you're working on your brain, it will actually work on the triggers first, and then once we've actually reduced the triggers and we stop the brain from triggering, we then go and work on patterns of behaviour. And like I said, if your genetic brain goes up to 7 generations of genetic memory, you're talking about 600 years of history. So I'm 56. So if it's me, it's 656 years of information that's gone into my brain.
It's like an overload, right?
600, yeah, it is. And 600 years of that is information that we don't know what is all about. We might know my grandparents and their grandparents, but we don't know anything past that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Wow.
So we actually work. So my technique that I can't say what it is so intelligent that it goes in and finds all the problems of behaviour that are actually stored in the brain, and it actually lifts those problems and it lifts them, and then it stops the brain from going back into that memory file. So your brain is got filing cabinets all through your brain, trillions and trillions of filing cabinets. And every time you actually think about a certain thing, so you might think about the day your grandmother died, and it came up in a conversation. You think about that, and that was a painful memory for you. For example, your brain would go back into that filing cabinet, lift up that file, and then actually give it to your neurons, and your neurons would actually transfer it all through your neural pathways and your synapses. And before you know it, you're feeling all those emotions that you felt when grandma died.
Wow.
So what my technique does is stops that filing cabinet from opening the drawer, and your brain your subconscious is a servant to the unconscious brain. And so when you feel a certain thing, your unconscious brain goes to the subconscious, go in and find me that particular bit of information. So your subconscious goes in there and finds that. So we stop the subconscious going in there and dragging out that memory, so you can break free from your past problems of behaviour.
Wow. I guess the first thing that pops into my mind is that's non-traditional.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, that kind
Yes,
of leads me into the next question, which is traditional approaches often, especially for mental illness, often require lifelong medication or repeated bouts with therapy. What about this technique? Are your clients experiencing lifelong relief, or is it something that they've got to kind of come back in and check in and get a reboot, or how does that work?
So that's a really good question, because I'll explain to you what actually happens. 98% of clients try our therapy, and the first session get a positive result. So 98% success rate. And we've got all the stats, we've got all the information to back that up. That's not something that I pulled out of my hair. The 4% of clients will become treatment resistant. So that's 4% of people that their brain, it doesn't matter what we do, they won't actually make a change. So they might have 2 or 3 sessions. And treatment-resistant people, they're all beautiful people and they want change, but their brain is unwilling to accept long-term change. They'll do short-term but not long-term. So that's 4%. It's around about 4%. Outside of that, most people, because we've got a home maintenance program, if you maintain your brain with the at-home program so you don't have to keep coming back in, and if you do the self-esteem and your confidence, we've got beautiful programs that build up self-esteem and confidence, and then we put people on a monthly maintenance after that for 8 months. But what we do is we actually develop them and transform them into somebody that they only dreamed about. If they do all that, the chances of long-term change is really quite available to them, because they break free from their old familiar self. What actually happens is people, if they actually don't break free from their old familiar self actually drags them back in. And that's generally people with low self-esteem and lacking in confidence. So we're really sticklers of actually, you've got to build up your self-esteem, you've got to build up your confidence. If you actually are a person that actually has mental illness, you have low self-esteem and you have lacking confidence. Yeah. So you've got to build that up. And if you build that up, you build resilience. So it's about building the resilience in a person, and that can be a 12-month journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's like something that you don't really have straight off the bat. You wouldn't assume that you have control over building confidence, right? Because it's something that comes out of you and you can't apparently help it. But I guess that sounds awesome that people can do that from home, especially with the lifestyles that people have. And I guess that leads me to my next question, which is obviously aside from that 4% of resistant people, but does your approach generally work on, everyone and every condition, or is, a different brains and ailments, do they respond in different ways, or is there kind of like a universal sweet spot that generally across the board seems to help a lot of people?
If you don't fall into that treatment-resistant category, your brain actually has a very successful experience with my program.
Awesome.
And I'm always trying to work on the treatment-resistant people, but they're just it's a little bit like the Titanic. It takes a big iceberg to kind of put a hole in it and to make it sink or swim.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to work hard to get those people to not be treatment-resistant, but I'm failing miserably.
That's a big challenge. I mean, you can't take responsibility for that yourself, can you? You can do your best.
I know.
It's hard when you care about people. Yeah.
When you have, say, a 94% success rate of people coming through your program, you actually you really focus on the 4% that you can't help. Whereas with the 94%, we treat people like with bipolar, borderline personality disorder, postnatal depression, complex depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, anger, and all different issues in between. And we actually do get a really good success rate. And the reason being is because we treat the cause, not the effect.
Yeah. I think that's very important in medicine that I think a lot of medicines don't look at.
Coming from America, I can vouch that we're not treating the cause here.
And most people don't, because the cause is genetic.
Yeah.
So I'll just explain this to you so you can get understanding about what a genetic brain does. You inherit the fabric of your brain either from your mother's side or your father's side, and your brain fabric either tolerates stress or is intolerant to stress. So if you're intolerant to stress, the chances of you creating triggering behaviour that creates patterns of behaviour that causes eventually over time, because mental illness, depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, bipolar and all these other disorders don't happen one day to the next. It happens over a 10 to 15 year journey. Yeah. And so if your brain is intolerant to stress, the chances of you having a mental illness of some type is actually quite significant.
Interesting.
I'm wondering, I'm just kind of wondering now, is this approach, does it have a relationship with meditation? Because we've heard of clients sometimes falling asleep during treatment, and just kind of wondering if there's a certain type of mind frame people should be in for the best results or things like that.
So the mind frame, you've got to have an open mind frame to change. Anybody that wants to have a different life, and the thing with your brain, the more money you invest in your brain, the better life that you get. But you've got to be open to change. You've got to have a brain that's willing to change. You've got to have a brain that is actually excited about change. Like I said, people that are treatment resistant don't like long-term change. So if you're a person that actually struggles with accepting change and having change, this treatment can be a little bit difficult for you, but long term it's really quite good.
Yeah, so beneficial if you can force yourself to kind of get through the hurdles at the beginning.
Yeah, really
and
cool.
And also too, sorry about that. you don't have to. When people fall asleep, because we switch off the conscious brain.
Yeah.
So we actually take away all stimulus from the conscious brain. So we actually have an eye mask. We had noise cancelling headphones. So when the people come into our spa, they can't even hear us recoding the brain.
Oh.
It's subliminal. It goes in because your unconscious brain is telepathic by nature, and so that's why it uses sound waves and frequencies to communicate. So the conscious brain isn't. So the conscious brain requires senses and perception to communicate, whereas the unconscious doesn't. It's telepathic, and so we actually use that telepathy of the brain to go and communicate in. So we bypass the conscious brain, which is your stress brain. It accounts for 70% of your stress. Mm-hmm. We relax that down. We get into that unconscious brain, and people normally just switch off. And some people, they snore.
Yeah,
they kind of wake themselves up with when they actually do a back snore. When they kind of
I know where I am. Oh, that's so funny.
And then they get a bit of a fright that they're not in their bed, and somebody might hear them snoring, and then they apologise at the end of it. And I just say to people, snoring is just a sign of appreciation and of good work.
Yeah, right. That's so fascinating, that idea of the telepathic brain. I like that. So if anyone who's listening who may not be in Australia, obviously your clinic is located in Perth, Western Australia, for those who don't know. But you've helped people from all over the world, not just in Australia. So how does that work? And what's the difference between in-person and remote treatments?
So in person, when you come to our spa, you've got a beautiful surrounding. So you've got the rooms that are beautiful, the furnishings beautiful, the smells are beautiful, and it's kind of like your little sanctuary. Like the rooms are made up to be a sanctuary, very nurturing, very supportive, very just a beautiful environment. When you're actually at home, so we actually with COVID-19 we had to shift all of our sessions to virtual visits, and people were a little bit concerned in the beginning, but people are loving them because, number one, they can be in their bedroom, they don't have to drive down to the spa. They set up their room with music, with scented candles, dim lights. So it's actually kind of setting up that sanctuary, and then they can just lay in their bed afterwards and actually just kind of rest it through. If you can relate to that. So
that sounds
we've
awesome.
Actually got clients. Yeah. So we've got clients all over the world. To be honest, I love having people contact one-on-one.
Yeah.
When you do the virtual sessions, you just don't get that hug at the end of it. You don't get that high five when you're achieving things. So I do a virtual hug now. So I put the phone near a cheek and I just hug the phone. So we do virtual hugs.
That's nice.
Virtual hugs.
I get that because it's quite hard because I think a big part of mental illness is feeling lonely, right? So I think that's a nice aspect to it, is that you're not alone, and here we are together. That's nice.
Yeah. And you know what I worked on? I'm glad you brought that up because I worked on the whole premise of loneliness, loneliness, hopelessness, isolated, unwanted, unloved. And when I worked out, they were feelings, they're just feelings, but they're not just feelings, but they are just feelings.
Yeah. And
all our feelings are linked to our perception. Does that make sense? We live in a world of 7 billion people, but so many people are lonely. And loneliness actually often stems from childhood.
Yeah.
So when I worked out how to actually change the feelings and get people more contented, loneliness actually simply just disappears. So it's one of the byproducts. We help with people get their feelings right because your thoughts give rise to your thinking gives rise to your emotions give rise to your feelings.
Yeah.
And so if your thoughts are right and your thinking's right, your emotions are right, and then therefore your feelings are right.
Nice. So our body is just a well-oiled machine, and sometimes it's not so well-oiled, so we need to oil it ourselves.
And it's a very complex. Your brain is really complex, So some people say that the heart is the first brain, and I say to them, but your brain has to filter the information to send it down to the heart. Your heart doesn't filter the information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
So your brain is your priority, and there's so many people that are actually had lives that have come to us that haven't been the best. They've had failed relationships, sabotaging relationships, problems with money and everything, and work on their brain, and all of a sudden their lives just change and they're the happiest they've ever been.
Nice. I guess that answer kind of leads me on to my next question. You're doing great here. You're just like answering my next questions. It's brilliant. Thank you. You're doing it for us. But how can, so we've talked about people coming to visit you with mental illness. But what about people who don't actually have any mental health issues, but how can they benefit from your technique, and what kind of other situations and topics do you help with?
So we've got a beautiful program called Prosperity and Abundance, and it's only 4 sessions. You don't have to have mental illness to actually access that program, and that program is actually put your brain into an attraction machine. So you attract better relationships, you attract more work opportunities. We've got video testimonials on our website that you can have a look on. But one guy is actually 3x'd his income just from doing that program. So he's actually doing really well. There's people that have actually completely changed their lives from that program. So that's actually a personal development program. Okay. We've got the Unstoppable You. Oh my goodness, that is one of my elixirs. It's just it actually transforms you into becoming an unstoppable machine. So it doesn't mean that you're a bull in a china shop, but what it means is life doesn't stop you. So with COVID-19, what actually happens is you pick yourself up and you just keep going. So Unstoppable You is a really good one. You can't have mental illness to do that program. It's a performance base, so it's good for elite athletes. It's good for CEOs. It's good for executives. It's good for career development. It's good for everybody that actually wants to get more out of their life. So Unstoppable Use it.
Nice.
And we've got another program that is not you don't have to have mental illness for, and that is a program that is actually called Positive Mindset Expression. It's only 4 sessions, but you can do the introductory session first, which is only $79. But in America, for you Americans, one lady was one of our clients. I know, it's only $137 a session. Okay. So it's really, really cheap for the Americans. But the Positive Mindset Express, for those people that are infected by COVID-19 that don't necessarily have mental illness, it's an amazing program that actually gets your mindset positive and gets more resilience in your mindset and stops you from going into those anxiety patterns that have actually been a byproduct of COVID-19, or the struggles that people are having with COVID-19.
That's really great.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are struggling with that as well right now, which I think is
well, obviously the isolation and everything. I'm sure that I had a question just kind of randomly about, have you seen any sort of increase in business? And I'm wondering if you're thinking you might, as these quarantines and isolations kind of keep going more long term.
Well, see, with my business, we're not covered by government or private health, so I haven't seen an increase in business just yet. But we're one of those businesses that are actually reliant on people to have good incomes to come and see us, because we're not covered by the system. But what actually happens is people, I feel, once they get their confidence back and once the restrictions lifted, there's been so much anxiety, there's been so much stress, there's been so much worry, there's been so much uncertainty that my business will be inundated once the economy starts to settle a bit. But there's a big increase in mental health at the moment. They say that mental health is going to be the second wave. With COVID-19.
You
can definitely just kind of get that feel talking to people. One of the things, Terri, is that we just find your story just so inspiring. And for the listeners, you can go to her website. If you want to talk about it, you can. But if you go to your website, it's on there.
Terri's been where you've been,
and that's what's just so amazing about it. You've just been where so many of your patients have been. So we're wondering, what's a key piece of advice that you would share with any of our listeners who may be going through something with their mental health, similar to what you went through, or just in some sort of struggle?
I'll just share you a little bit of my background, just so that if they don't go to the website, they know a little bit about about it. I was helping people with depression, anxiety, mild to moderate depression, anxiety. And I remember I spoke out aloud and I said, please help me identify what these people are going through because I'm not relating to them. And so what actually happened is was I just said out loud, please help me identify. I said to God, you don't have to be a believer in the religious God, but there is something that is actually universally supporting people out there. And I just said out loud to God, I said, please help me identify what these people are going through because I couldn't relate to them. My idea of an antidepressant was an airline ticket. So I used to have an airline ticket in my handbag all the time. And
I could
so
relate
if
to
ever
that.
I felt down or whatever, do you relate to that? Yep. So that was my antidepressant. And then so within 6 months of saying that, I was actually in a psychotic, into a locked ward and having menstrual psychosis, which was a side effect from IVF.
Oh, okay.
And with menstrual psychosis, what actually happens is the onset of a menstrual cycle, my brain would go into a psychotic episode and I'll actually end up in a locked ward. And that actually happened 40-odd times. And so it was really distressing. It was, number one, it was humiliating. I've never had mental illness. Friends kind of didn't support me. I had some friends that supported me, some friends that didn't relate to me. I was a changed woman. I had massive depression, anxiety. I was suicidal. I was planning to kill myself. Yeah. I was actually, I couldn't get out of bed. I was so burnt out because I was constantly having psychotic episodes. My brain got to an acute state of burnout. Yeah. And so I had to work out, the system wasn't helping me. So what they would do is put me on all this medication. The medication was making me suicidal and my brain weakened. My brain got really weak. So I had to learn how to actually strengthen my brain out. I had to learn everything that I actually am today is a byproduct of what I've done, not from the actual
like the education
the establishment. Yeah, so it wasn't from the medical professions, because the medical professions actually said to me I was going to be a long-term psychiatric patient.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I love that your attitude is like, no, I won't.
Yeah,
I'm going to find my own
just say no.
way. Like, I love that because I've got friends who suffer from a lot of, like, a variety of mental health disorders, and one big thing that they've been through is medication, and they're like, this medication is too strong. It doesn't make me feel like me. There has to be another way. I'm open to it, but what is that way?
Yeah, and it's about rebuilding your brain too, because, like with me, I was 45 when I actually first had my psychotic episode for my mental health concern. So I didn't have it as a young child, and I didn't have it as a young adult. I was late in life, and which is unusual because most people that actually have mental illness, some form of mental illness
earlier on, isn't it?
Have it earlier on, and so I was actually what they call atypical. I wasn't your typical person that I would fall in, and my condition was rare, and because I never had it till later in life, I knew what it was like to have a great brain. And then I lost that, so I was actually more willing to fight for it back. But if I had been sick from a child, I wouldn't have known the difference.
Yeah, you wouldn't have had that push.
I wouldn't have had that push, and my personality changed. I started to get really timid around people. It was pathetic. The difference your brain can make you. So I worked really hard and I fight because I suffered and I suffered and I suffered. And the cruelty of suffering, you can't describe it if you've never experienced it. Yeah. So I work really hard to stop people from suffering. One of my big things is to end all suffering.
Yeah.
Love that.
And that's because suffering, people that try to commit suicide, I didn't want to die. I just wanted to end the suffering.
Yeah.
I did. I just wanted to end the suffering. So, and dying was the only choice that I could have to end my suffering. So, when people take their lives, I can quite get it because there's only two things that stopped me from killing myself, and that was number one, I was too scared with what I was going to do. Somebody would find me and I'd end up being on life support or a vegetable.
Yeah.
Or sitting in a nursing home just looking, staring out of space. And the second thing is I had a client turn around to me and she wanted to kill herself and her two kids. And she said to me, you've got to help me because I want to kill my two children and myself. And you've got to help me.
Wow.
And so she stopped me, and it took the focus off me. So I thank God for Kylie every day. So she took the focus off me. It was all about me, because when you're suicidal, you're totally self-absorbed. You are so self-absorbed.
Yep.
So it took that third party, just to be like, I need you.
It took her to say, I'm going to kill my kids. I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to kill my kids. You've got to help me. And I said to her, it's a conscious brain behaviour. I don't know how to do that. Anyway, so I actually just went to the drawing board and worked out how to do it.
Awesome.
And today she works for me. Her kids are grown up. They're living a beautiful life, and she's living a beautiful life. So
amazing.
And so am I.
So with all that in mind, everyone's now heard the backstory, so they know that they can relate. It's not like a usual thing where therapists are so separate from their clients. And again, what's the key piece of advice you would take from being in that situation? What if you could hear a sentence that back then that you could give to someone now, what would it be?
You've got to find somebody. See, the thing is, when you're suffering from mental illness, you actually contract away from people. That's what I did. Some of the beautiful people that I was too ashamed of myself. I thought I was broken and everything. So the thing you've got to do is somehow you've got to get to a point where you actually step aside from yourself. And that's really hard, but you actually have to go out there and embrace something that gives you that little bit of hope. The work we do gives you instant hope, but if you can't access what we have to offer, you've got to find something that will give you instant hope. If you have no hope in the future, you have no power in the present. And most people are powerless. Does that make sense? So they don't feel they have the power to get through the day. And so, so spending your day in bed, I spend so long in bed that my body ached because I was in bed for so long. And because I just couldn't face reality. I couldn't face the day. And if you're in that situation, on our website, you can go to www.brainwellnessspa.com.au. There's a free download for hope. It's called Hope. It's for suicidal thoughts and sense of hopelessness. So you can download that and listen to that. But you need to find that somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you feel connected with, that you feel can offer you the support to get you through your challenges, because life, it's not a forever thing. But you've got to find the right therapy. It's actually finding the right therapy is the most important thing.
Really amazing, Terri. I mean, just such an inspirational story, and
really
the fact that you've gone from that point and in roughly a decade, like turned it around and are now helping people to the extent that you're doing is just incredible. And we just are. Thank you so much for spending.
We just
some time
met you,
with
and
us.
we're proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah, you should be.
I've gone from one idea, like one person. I built my business up just with one person. Like I actually practice on one person, and then I practice on two people, and I went from there. And today we've treated thousands and thousands. So we're going to franchise. So eventually we'll come to America. We're in a situation where we've got a researcher doing research on my technique to give it evidence base. So watch this space.
Everyone knows that.
Terri, no problem here. We are used to paying for medical care that isn't covered by our insurance.
So everyone's ready. Oh my God, America's healthcare is awful. It's awful.
Is it?
Yeah. So thank you so much. We're so thankful, and we will. We're gonna anything that we've talked about, and especially your website and linking people to your message of hope. That's going to be in our show notes. And we hope that you and your family and everyone that you know is safe throughout all of this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Interview digestion.
Wow. I mean,
fascinating.
Unbelievable. I just absolutely loved talking to her. We really hope that you guys enjoyed listening and just learned so much.
Yeah, aside from being obviously such an inspiring and warm person, what a fountain of knowledge, you know? Just even the fact that epigenetics comes into play with this kind of stuff. It's very interesting.
All these different things that we're talking about, she is just kind of came up throughout this one interview, and it was just very fascinating, and we're very just thankful because she met with us on an Australian holiday. So she gave us some of her time there. And, I mean, what were some of your takeaways on that? What do you think about the idea of going away from the medications and stuff like that and trying to something that maybe science isn't necessarily 100% behind right now, but at least giving it a shot?
I completely agree with it. I mean, I know so many people who have mental health and issues and they don't want to take the medication because it's so strong. And, you know, I've had friends say, you know, they took antidepressants and they just kind of felt numb and they didn't feel themselves, and I've seen that effect on them as well. And so I'm like such an advocate of natural therapies because I don't trust drug companies. I don't really believe in them to want to help people. So yeah, I think that was really interesting.
And I think just the fact that she is getting better and better at helping people who aren't in face to face. I mean, I love that she loves to do that because she likes to have the connection and give the hug afterwards. But yeah, you don't have to fly to Perth to do this. She can do this with you. Just find yourself a nice little zen spot in your house and give it a shot. So if you're really struggling and you're tired of the medications, we would definitely recommend looking her up because this just sounds like such a unique place. And I mean, music is therapy. How often do we just turn to our favorite artist or a certain type of song that we know is going to affect us and maybe put us in a little bit better mood?
Yeah, or even like how much music controls your mood as well. I can just like listen to one song and all of a sudden I'll go into the mode of what that song makes me feel, you know?
Yeah, no, it's one thing you guys don't know is that right before we start recording, Lianne just puts on some of the heaviest freaking metal.
Oh yeah, some of that thrash metal, you know?
Pumped.
I'm actually got some in a headphone right now, guys. But no, we can definitely agree that we've been listening to the alpha waves as we sleep. I love a good nature sound, as if any of my friends are listening, you know. But no, it's really nice. Actually takes the leaderboard of the falling rain sounds.
Yeah, you know, it's been a really good thing.
Take it further.
So taking it further today, we know that Terri was nice enough to mention her website. There is a wealth of information on there, and you can find that link in our show notes, so check it out. And don't be afraid just to get on to YouTube or Spotify or anywhere that you're listening to music. And as you're falling asleep tonight, or just maybe you're at the office or whatever you might be doing, put on some alpha wave music. Just kind of be cognizant of that. See how it might make you feel. Listen to it for a good hour, if more, or if not more.
And I actually have a question for you, Corey. As a musician, listening to what Terri has to say and thinking about one of our other episodes where we are going to talk about self-expression, how do you kind of relate that information together? I'm kind of interested.
Yeah, music for me has always just been something. I didn't start playing any instruments until I was 20. But I had this really great mentor who was a guy who worked for my dad, shout out Brian. And he, one of the first things as he was teaching me some of my first chords on the guitar that he told me was one of the side benefits of just being able to play an instrument and then being able to perform for people is that guitar rests against your chest and it just sends these nice little vibrations into your body. And he's like, so if you're ever feeling stressed or you ever got any sort of you're overwhelmed by something, just grab that guitar, hold it, strum it, sing a song, and honestly, it can just like change my mood if I need it to.
Now I know. Next time you get in a really horrible mood, I'm just going to show up with a guitar and be like, dance with me.
Yeah. Well, and if you're thinking this kind of thing is a whatever, you have a bunch of questions about it, think about the last time that you went to a really good concert and everyone in that show, the entire audience, the musicians, everyone was just kind of connected, singing that song.
On that energy.
Maybe you were at the closing down the bar and you were singing Journey. I don't know what was going on.
Been there, done that.
But you walk out of those kinds of concerts just with this vibration coming off of you, and everyone that's around you has it too. And that's kind of what this seems to be relating to. And there's a lot of healing that goes involved with that. So make sure that you pay attention to this kind of thing, because I definitely think that there's something to it.
And speaking of healing, I'm feeling pretty unhealed today, Corey. Why don't you pick up that guitar and strum a little song for us all?
Spunky Songs with Corey.
I'm all locked in, sometimes I feel so alone. The Rona got us stuck inside of our homes, between workouts and cooking and drinking too. I'm trying to keep busy, but I'm running out of things to do. Yeah, I'm running out of things to do. Oh, COVID-19, is it all a bad dream? The store's out of teepee and the wife's got a wee. I can't wait for the day till we're all free. But until then, we just gotta let it be. Yeah, we gotta let it be.
Lovely song, darling.
They were your words, darling.
Thank you very much, darling. And thank you for listening. I'm sure now we're all going to be acutely more aware of how sound influences us. And if you do want to learn anything more about sound therapy, make sure you visit the lovely Terri Bowman's page at brainwellnessspa.com.au. There's heaps of information and courses.
And do not forget to tune in to episode 8, where we are going to be looking at attraction and resistance, how much we can and can't control our lives, and how not to let it get the best of you. And we're going to have an interview with the great author and lovely interview, Paige Oldham, voiceover guy. Take it away, my man.
Thanks, Lianne and Corey. Subscribe now to the Forever Break podcast on your favorite platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, help us out and leave a 5-star review. And remember, you can find all the juicy details discussed in this episode in the show notes at foreverbreak.com/podcast.